So today I just wanted to go through with you in person limiting factors and carrying capacity. So these are all just going to be different factors that can impact population. So here's where it's kind of cool. We have ecology and there's a little bit of math that comes in. So you might have seen this before in geography. This is actually the formula for population growth. So population growth is said to be because of births plus emigration minus deaths plus immigration. So a really nice way to look at it is over here. So we can see factors that add to population growth, so factors that add to the population. So that's births. Another word for births is called natality. Natality means birth rate. Or immigration. Immigration is individuals moving into an area. Populations can decline because of mortality or the death rate, or emigration, individuals moving out of the area. So our overall population growth curve is going to be things that add to the population minus things that take away from the population. The biggest impact is going to be birth rate and death rate, but immigration and emigration can also add to it. So we have two different types of populations that we look at in this unit. One is called an open population. So an open population is like an open ecosystem. This is going to allow for births, deaths, immigration, and emigration to occur. So an example of this is a rabbit in a forest without any natural boundaries. Closed population. Closed populations do not allow for individuals to move into or out of an area. So think of like a goldfish. You can't have fish come in, you can't have fish go out. So the only thing that's really impacting population growth here is our birth rate and our death rate. Limiting factors, we can actually sort into abiotic or biotic factors. Remember, we covered the terms abiotic and biotic at the beginning of this unit. So abiotic means non-living, biotic means living. So a limiting factor is any factor that's going to restrict population size. So non-living things that might limit population could be temperature, sunlight, water, extreme weather, soil, or pollution. Living things that could limit population could be food, the availability of mates, competition for resources, predators, or disease. So in a healthy ecosystem, we actually have these factors to keep things in check. So in an ecosystem, you actually want to have limiting factors, whether they're abiotic or biotic, to keep the population in check. Remember our food pyramid lab that you did last week or last block, where if one trophic level is unchecked, it can actually impact the trophic levels below it and above it. So limiting factors is one of those things that stops populations from getting out of control. Now we want to talk about this idea of carrying capacity. So carrying capacity, let's take a look at what the definition is first. Carrying capacity is the maximum population size of a species that an ecosystem can sustain. So carrying capacity is the maximum population size of a single species. This is because at some point a population is going to reach a maximum number of organisms that it can support. So one of these limiting factors is eventually going to limit the population so much that it kind of caps the population. It might be temperature, it might be extreme weather, or more likely it's going to be the food availability, the availability of water, the availability of mates, or competition or predation. So let's take a look at the carrying capacity graph, how we might actually represent this graph. And this is actually showing a species as it grows. So as a species grows in population, you can see it's going to grow over time. And on this axis, we have the population size. It's actually going to go through 3 different growth periods. So we can see growth period A here is actually a period of very, very, very slow growth. We call this the region of slow growth population. Why this is so slow is there's a small number of organisms. So there's not as many mates available. Maybe you only start with 2 or 4 rabbits. It's harder to find mates. And even if they're doubling and doubling and doubling, that growth rate is still pretty slow. They're also adjusting to the new environment, so they tend not to reproduce as fast. Then all of a sudden you can see population actually takes off. That's in this region of rapid population growth here. This is because organisms have now adjusted to their environment and they're ready to reproduce. Finally, up here, we have this region of steady population growth. This is actually the carrying capacity. So you can see the carrying capacity is this line that's actually right across here. And at this point, we've said that the population maximum has been reached. That doesn't mean that there's no new individuals being born. There's still individuals being born, but typically individuals are dying off at the exact same rate that individuals are being born because of one of those limiting factors. Let's talk quickly about population density. So, limiting factors are sometimes influenced by how dense a population is. What the word dense means is the number of species in an area. So, some factors that will depend on density dependent factors, are like competition and predation. So, for example, picture a rabbit population that's very, very, very concentrated, very dense. If you have a lot of rabbits, it's much easier for predators to catch those rabbits. So therefore, the predation rate is going to be much higher in a dense population. Same idea with competition. When you have lots and lots and lots of rabbits, you're competing for food. You're competing with more rabbits for food. So competition is going to be a bigger factor in a denser population. So it's considered to be density dependent. On the other hand, you have some limiting factors that are density independent. So some density independent factors could include weather. So let's say you all of a sudden have a tornado and it comes in and wipes out a rabbit population. Really doesn't depend on how many rabbits there are, right? It's going to happen. It's density independent. A natural disaster, I just mentioned tornadoes, is another example of a density independent factor. So these are all factors that can represent population growth. And again, this graph just really shows how this actually is a mathematical equation. We call this logarithmic growth, and you're going to study it more if you take grade 12 biology.